What's good? It's your boy. It's your boy,
Skinny penis.
It's your boy Nosphere. I decided to make a brand new YouTube series called Reacting to YouTube Tutorials, especially dubstep tutorials. So today we're going to react to Dripment's compression and OTT setup for beginners. Easy, Ableton Live. The reason I wanted to start this series a long time ago is because I'm sure you probably know that I teach online through Zoom and Discord. I usually do like one-on-one lessons, and people have a crazy amount of misinformation from tutorials. So if you have a sussy tutorial that you want me to react to, or you know, if you're curious about a plugin like an effects or anything, and then you want me to react to any tutorials about that effect, we can do that, no problem. And I can tell you if it's useful or not useful for dubstep in general. So let's get cracking with Dripment.
And why it's so important. We're also going to be going over bass loops. And to me, what we want to do is make this louder. So usually what we would do is use compression to make it louder. Now, it's best not to just...
Actually, side note, compressors are made to make sounds quieter, and they're made to increase the perceived loudness. So that's one really important thing if you're teaching about compression.
Throw it on, but rather understand how it works so that you can use it for different types of sounds. Because when you add it to this bass loop...
If you want to know how a compressor works, just use this video as reference, because that's a super detailed and well put together video about compression. So use that if you want to know the exact specifics of a compressor.
Turn down, which is a good sign. That means we're compressing. If we keep...
I mean, that sound he put the glue on, it's already so fucking loud and distorted, and it has basically no dynamics that I think, in my opinion, it doesn't need any compression at all at this stage or at this point. So
keep turning it down, it compresses it a lot.
I mean, we are talking about a single band compressor, so it's not going to affect anything apart from the overall volume. If he puts it back up with the makeup gain, it's going to sound the same.
And then we use this makeup to turn it back up.
He pushes it well above what he reduces, so that's why it starts distorting.
So this compressor is one of my favorites. It's very strong, very powerful. And we're controlling all the frequencies at one time. Lows, mids, highs. Do less compression by turning the...
Yeah, it's a single band plugin. Still,
right,
it sounds better because it started to distort because he pushes it over 0 and it's clipping. That's all. It's not really compressing that much.
-6 now. Before. Coming in about -10 LUFS. If we simply add a Multiband Dynamics, this will make it louder.
Okay, so what he did here is actually putting in a Multiband Dynamics and boosting every single band by 6 dB. Basically does the same thing as putting a utility on there and boosting the whole song or the whole sound by 6 dB. He basically just clips the signal into a clipper or at the end of the mastering. It's like, it's not even compressing at all. As you can see, the ratio is 1:1, so whatever crosses the threshold, it's not getting reduced by anything.
So, before, after.
Oh, and also LUFS or LUFS is is a value used for estimating loudness, and it takes LUFS as a standard takes your ear's frequency response into consideration, because your ear is more sensitive to, for example, 3.4 kilohertz compared to 80 hertz. So LUFS is not the actual digital loudness of the track. It's just an estimate of... It's a different standard, that's what I'm trying to say. It's not the actual digital peak loudness of the signal, of the sample, or the synth, or whatever.
This is a huge noticeable difference. Keep in mind, this multiband dynamics has been slightly modified. Usually it's at 0, but we're turning them up 6 dB to give us some more input signal so that it can work easier. And I actually have saved it like this. This is my
Why would it be easier?
preset, so I'll save that as is. This is what I use most of the time to just get things loud. It's a small, subtle form of compression. OTT is another form of multiband dynamics. It's actually a preset for multiband dynamics. And it's over-the-top compression. It's basically compression and expansion at its maximum levels. Remember, dynamics is the whole thing that we are focused on here, and we use the compressor.
Okay, yeah, you can read all that if you want to.
What they're talking about is in his Fifth Symphony, he's going from like super quiet to super loud. When it goes from quiet to loud, that's the emotion we're feeling. It's almost like the basis of EDM, right? We go from the breakdown, which is quieter. It starts getting louder in the build-up. Boom. Drop happens. If your song...
But that's... that thing that he read, dynamics, add interest, emotion, and drama to music. Imagine the dramatic opening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, but without dynamics. Yes. Dynamics can do all of those things, but not in EDM. In EDM, you have a negligible amount of dynamics, like 6 to like 8 dB. In classical music, you have a lot of dynamics. That's not even close. Some instruments are super quiet, some are insanely loud. But in electronic music, there's next to no dynamic range because everything is just simply loud. Even pop songs are loud these days. If you pull in a pop song or I don't know, like a Travis Scott song, that's not pop, I know, but it's like super mainstream. If you pull in one of those tracks and let's say a Barely Alive track, it's almost the same dynamic range. They probably have, the Travis track probably has a little more, but it's not noticeable. I'd say dynamics is important as far as make your drop or the climax of the track the loudest part, obviously, but that's obvious in my opinion. And then everything else should be a little bit quieter. Nowadays, you can't really, especially in dubstep, rhythm tear out like the core dubstep thing that's booming right now. You probably won't be able to do like extremely dynamic tracks because there's just no crowd for it anymore. There probably is a small amount of people who care about dynamics, but nowadays everything just max loudness all the time, every time, and that's it.
The breakdown just makes will affect it.
Also, what he says, like the breakdown and build, drop, etc., those are songwriting differences, not dynamics differences.
Energy and emotion of the music, which affects everything in your composition. Most people, the reason why we're
here he basically explains that multiband dynamics can do upwards compression and downwards compression, which is just the opposite. So it basically compresses towards the threshold, not above the threshold. That's it. Okay, let's check out the examples.
Put it on 0. So regular, turned on. So we basically have to tell Ableton to allow more signal to come into the compressor. So that's why we're turning it up 6 dB so it can activate and start to compress and expand.
But you don't have any ratio, so there's not going to be any compression.
The way it compresses and expands is all based on these things here. So this is the threshold. This is these little bands here. This is where it activates. So you see, as we play the sound, you'll see the bars move. And then we can move these bars so that they activate at certain points.
So basically, what he tries to say is, this is the part where you set the upwards compression. This is where you set the downwards regular compression. You have low, mids, and highs separated by these frequencies. So mid is between 1.8 and 94 Hertz. High is above 1.8 kilohertz. Low is below 95 Hertz. And basically, you have a minus 60 dB threshold for the below and a 1:1 ratio. That's going to do nothing. If you up the ratio, it's going to push everything that's below minus 60 up to minus 60 if the ratio is big enough. And then the above will do the exact opposite. So if you have a minus 21 dB ceiling or threshold, it's going to decrease the volume based on the ratio you set. So if you have a high ratio, it's going to reduce it down to minus 21.
Remember, this is the threshold.
And then you have the time parameters for it, so you can set the compressors to be super fast or super slow.
And this is the output. These 3 bars are the output.
Those are not the output. Those are the downwards compression thresholds you're setting.
And these 3 are the input signal. So we have basically 6 different main controls to affect our sound.
Okay,
and
whatever.
On top of that, Multiband Dynamics is really important because it's not just a compressor for all the frequencies at once. It's not lows, mids, and highs all at one time, but rather we're splitting lows, mids, and highs.
Yeah, you have 6 compressors. 3 upwards, 3 downwards. Moving on.
Step and rhythm and tear out, and our sound and genre is leaning towards sounds that are overly compressed with less dynamics in the drop. And
it's always been this way.
Create some really unique sounds. So that's why it's used.
Always been this way ever since like 2011.
In our genre a lot. That's why we use OTT a lot, because we're taking it over the top and creating new sounds. So now that we understand a little bit about the Multiband Dynamics, let's go ahead and see what's going on here visually. So if we turn that on, that's good, clean volume compared to this.
It's just 6 dB louder.
It's very easy.
This is actual compression. The other one didn't do just 6 dB gain. This one, however, it compresses everything into these small little places. Hold up. Compresses everything into these small little spaces. So it compresses the lows. Everything below 88 hertz is going to be pushed above minus 40 because of the upwards compression, and then it's squashed back down to minus 33. If it shoots over minus 33, it's going to be squashed down, and if it's below minus 40, it's going to be 4 times louder. So yeah, it's basically just crushing all the frequency bands.
You immediately see it turned everything down.
As you can see, most of the thresholds here on the OTT of the above compression is minus 30-ish. So that's why we need to raise the output all the time, because it creates a big dip in volume overall. Obviously, you can make it faster by tweaking the attack release times. Also, disabling softney and putting it on peak instead of RMS makes it way faster as well.
That we're actually giving to the signals here. Over on the regular Multiband Dynamics, it's only 1/1, so it's very small amounts of compression. We're taking it very high, up to 4.17 here, and on the output, it's 1 to infinite. So very extreme levels of compression on each input and output signal on each band. First thing we're going to pay attention to, then the output signals are turned up as well. Then, now when you hear it, you can hear it.
Okay. I'm 18 minutes in, and I don't think this is helpful to anyone. I'm going to... Shut up. I'm going to show you what a compressor actually does. And how it's doing it. Okay. So, this is how you use an OTT. For example, I'm going to put in an OTT behind Serum, and I'm just going to play around with it, okay? Okay. So, let's create a growl real quick, okay? Spectral, monster, level all the way down. Make it half of a bar long, like a drop starter growl, okay? Let's gain the OTT up 12 dB. Now let's use a filter, maybe try band, and let's make a vowel movement. Okay, that's fantastic. Now add a sub bass. Now try distortion, then enable the OTT inside Serum. Add an EQ before the compressor. Just play around with it until it sounds cool. Sounds decent, right? Okay, now let's use a phaser, just a tiny bit. Okay, now that sounds fairly decent, right? Now if I turn off the OTT, just so we can see what's happening, I opened up a Pro Q on my master. Let's check out what's happening. We have these frequencies in the sound. If you enable OTT, it will make everything that you hear more squashed. So it's going to be smaller dynamics. It's going to be this many dynamics, exactly this much. This much. If I turn it on. Let's check this out on an oscilloscope. Without the OTT, we have a dynamics that looks like this. It goes down to silence because we have an LFO here that goes down to silence. Now if I turn on OTT, there's no more silence because it pulls everything back up. Now, what happens if we put another OTT in here? Everything is squashed again, but it's loud, and we like loud stuff because it's dubstep after all, so that's what we do. And then you can just grab a saturator with a soft clipper or just any kind of clipper and then just boost the frequencies you like into it so you can get the final result. If you don't like the extra noises, glitches that come from Serum because of the OTTs, you can use other methods to make it loud, but we're not talking about those in this video. If you want something interesting and you want quick results, quick loudness, slap on an OTT and it will compress everything upwards and it's gonna sound nice. If you wanna make it if you wanna use an OTT but make it less aggressive, you can put the amount down and the time up. This will make the compression slower and it will make it less aggressive. If you want to quickly compress the highs, for example, you can just go here, slap on a stock multiband like Dripment did, and then set the downwards ceiling so the actual input crosses it. And then increase the threshold. This way, the high end is compressed. Now, if you gain the high end after compression, so you gain the output, you only compress the high end. You can even go into the time section and make the timing shorter, so it's gonna get more aggressive. The shorter the time, the more aggressive it gets. But yeah, this is just a quick way of compressing the highs on a lead, for example. It's pretty nice. Let's watch the rest of that video.
And you can now start to balance these low frequencies and make it sound good. So you're controlling the dynamics for now.
He basically uses Multiband Dynamics as its EQ3. He uses it the same way.
Looking only the low frequencies now. The way it fades in and fades out, that is dynamics. Like the Wubs in Of the Trees songs, for example. If he didn't have it fade in and out, and he didn't have those dynamics, it would not feel the same.
So dynamics is the loudness difference between the quietest and the loudest part of your track. If you have the same amount of volume, but it's at -6, but it's the same ±1 dB, you still have 2 dB dynamic range at max. If it's smashed into the roof, and sometimes it dips to -2, it's the same 2 dB dynamic range. They have the same dynamic range, even though the one is quieter and the other one is distorted. Damn, that shit is busting on God.
There's not always a certain way to do it.
In dubstep and electronic music in general, quieter parts equal not less dynamics, or not more dynamics, sorry. Quieter parts equal less distortion, louder parts equal more distortion. So clip your drums either on the master or on the channel, doesn't really matter. Clip your drums, that's gonna give you a huge distortion piece in the beginning of the drum sample because of the transient, but don't clip the low end of your kick, for example, because that's gonna be buzzing and it's not a pleasant sound. You know, your snare transient, put a transient shaper on there, put a clipper afterwards. That transient is gonna be boosted to hell, and then the clipper is gonna distort it. And it's going to be so short that it's not going to be perceived as distortion. It's going to be perceived as just simply loudness.
Things. It's really a creative way to do it. You just have to know how to use these tools so you can go the direction you want to go. You're going to be using compression and multiband dynamics on your drum loops as well. So let's listen to this drum loop.
Ideally, if you're producing, you don't want to use drum loops like that. You always want to use your separate kick, clap, snare, hi-hats, open hi-hats, rides, whatever. Just use separate drum samples. If you're talking about an aim and break or a breakbeat loop, like top loop or anything like that, obviously you can use that separately in an intro or a break. But in the drop, you are much better off with your own drums. Not own drums, but like, you know, separate drum files.
Kick and clap. And a hat, doing some more top loops. If we play them together, it sounds like this.
You always want to leave transient for the kick drum or the snare, and you don't want to overlap like super loud cymbals with the kick. The key is don't want to overlap super loud. If you do a trap beat, obviously you can have a hi-hat under the kick, and basically the hi-hat is going to act like a transient for the kick drum. But this specific example is not good.
Now, if you add the multiband dynamics with them on 6,
it's going to just boost 6 dB.
which is my usual settings, it will sound like this. So it gets a lot louder.
Yes, and it's
Too loud. So we're going to turn down these input signals this time.
why would you raise it in the first place? It's maximized already. Got it.
So it's regular, separated.
It's not doing any compression!
Leveled out. Compression is meant to level out your signals.
Not doing any compression, my
For
butter!
example, if something's super loud, level those signals, which can
If
kill
you use
dynamics.
it, but you didn't.
Multiband dynamics use to kind of do the opposite and add dynamics. So very advanced mixing knowledge here. So very complex, very advanced mixing knowledge here. This is stuff that they taught us in school, but it really took me years of practicing in different ways and different aspects to understand. So this is why we're trying to go over all those aspects here.
The tree from. Did you eat? I'ma ask you again. Did you eat a tree from right here?
Like if you were to send all your tracks to a mastering engineer, they would want you
You don't want to use a mastering engineer in dubstep at all.
to turn all your
There's no point. There's no point.
tracks down to allow for some headroom. Might think the beat is cool, but he would think it's low energy because
There's some balancing issues there with the sub, I think. It's heavily leaning towards left.
the volume he's used to hearing for beats is just much higher, much more energy. So that's an
Lufts
issue.
is not everything,
So
by the way.
this, which gives us more control. We can still use multiband dynamics. So ideally, we would have each
He's not
vocal,
gonna have
drum,
any-
bass.
He's not going to have any ratio set. He's just going to be 6 dB louder. That's it.
Separated But since we're in the future and have amazing audio effects like Multiband Dynamics, we can essentially use this to control the sound. So let's go ahead and see what Multiband Dynamics does. So intro. Very good. Turn it on.
I always say to my students, around 10 dB dynamic range is really good in a dubstep track nowadays. If you do a -10 LUFS intro, or around hovering between -10 and -5, between those areas, that's great, fantastic. And then throughout your build-up, eventually it's going to get higher, obviously. But if you just automate the volume with a utility and the stereo field with a utility, so in the build it goes down and it gets narrow, you can aim at a -5 dB LUFS, -6, -5, around that area when you arrive to the pre-drop vocal. And then when you drop into the song, you can get around -3, -2, and that's a good rule to follow, in my opinion, like LUFS differences between sections.
-12. This compressor is turning up the lows too much. The sub is starting to distort and sound muddy and not
Yes,
clean.
because it's not compressing at all. You're just digitally clipping, brother man. The EQ3 in Ableton is basically the same thing. You have 3 bands, low, mids, highs, and I believe it's +6 and -24 dB on the gain range. That's it.
They're really up there, so we're going to turn these down.
Doesn't really matter because the frequencies on the crossover points will add up. So it's going to add up in volume. Even though if your sub part doesn't cross the 0 mark, it's still going to distort because the frequencies add up. And overall, the stereo loudness is going to be louder than 0. So it's going to clip either way.
To this, basically. You'll see it's a much bigger difference. See how the sub has gotten up there?
Okay, I've had enough. No offense to Dripment. This just goes to show you that you have to hone in your craft before you start a YouTube channel based around teaching others. Obviously, not everyone can be a sound engineer, I know that, but just think twice where you get your information from. Shameless plug here, I do production lessons, so if you want to learn from a certified sound engineer, I can teach you the ins and outs of music creation, primarily in Ableton, but everything I teach is doable in other DAWs like FL Studio. Yeah, I explained everything. He tweaked an OTT or like a Multiband Dynamics plugin with no ratio. So I'd rate this tutorial probably a 2 out of 10. He had good intentions, but the knowledge was just not there at all. So I would rate this a 2 out of 10. Good job. See you guys in the next one. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to check out my website for a lot of high quality Serum and Vital presets and drum samples. You can also support me on Patreon, where I upload bass music specific tutorial content every single month. Peace.